32. Okay. Hello, everyone. We will be beginning at 12 sharp. We're waiting for people to join. The audience is in fact muted. I'm just answering a question from the audience. Should we get started? Well, we're at 12 o'clock now, so we might as well get started. Good day, everyone. Welcome to today's ACCE seminar, which is discussing certification in clinical engineering. Next. My name is Kim Greenwood, and I will be the moderator of today's session. I am an ACCE board member at large and executive director of the Regional Clinical Engineering Service run out of the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Next. Before we start, I would like to take care of a few logistical issues. All attendees have their microphones muted during the presentation. Questions to the panelists must be submitted via the Q&A feature in Zoom at any time. If there is an urgent issue, please use the chat feature to communicate with the panelists. Please remember to complete the webinar evaluation after attending. A link will be provided at the end of the presentation. Next. Now I'd like to start our program by introducing our distinguished group of presenter panelists. First, I would like to introduce Bhaskar Aiduri, who is Vice President of Healthcare Technology Management and Quality Assurance at Renewal Solutions in Irvine, California. He has been in the HTM field for the past 10 years. He is a member of AMI's Technology Management Council and chair of the ACCE's Body of Knowledge Committee. Next. I would now like to introduce Catherine Navarro. Catherine Navarro is a biomedical engineer with the VHA Office of Healthcare Technology Management, where she supports the biomedical engineering field in the VA from a national level from San Antonio, Texas. Catherine has been with the VA in healthcare technology management for the last 12 years. Catherine has also served as chair of the ACCE Board of Body of Knowledge Committee from 2017 to 2019, and is currently on the ACCE board of directors as a member at large. Next. I would like to next introduce Timothy Zakutny, who is Senior Vice President of Digital Health and Cardiac Technology and Chief Information Technology Officer at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Timothy is also an adjunct research professor with the Department of Computer and Systems Engineering at Carleton University. Timothy has been a key contributor in the clinical engineering field for over the last 20 years, serving previously as president of the Canadian Medical and Biological Engineering Society, CCE-US. He previously chaired the Canadian Board of Examiners for Clinical Engineering Certification and has remained active on the board for many years. Next. Finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Katrina Jacobs, who is a senior clinical systems engineer with Kaiser Permanente in Northern California, where she currently manages a regional capital equipment portfolio, ensuring the strategic planning, acquisition, and implementation of clinically reliable, safe, and cost-effective healthcare technology. Over the last 10 years of her diverse experience, she has been working with the largest healthcare delivery organizations in the US. She is recognized for her award-winning contributions, improving patient safety and advancing healthcare technology management. Additionally, she is an active member of several professional organizations, including AMI, Health Sector Coordinating Council, Medical Device Servicing Community, and the United States Board of Examiners for Certification in Clinical Engineering. Now we'll begin our presentation, and I'll now hand over the floor to Catherine Navarro. Catherine.
Hi, thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. So today we'll be providing you an overview of the Clinical Engineering Certification Program. We'll first go over the governance of the certification program. We'll talk about the why, so reasons you should obtain certification. We'll cover the certification process, eligibility requirements, as well as the application process. We'll go over attaining certification, the Registry of Certified Clinical Engineers, and the certification renewal process. We'll also cover other certification statuses and status changes, the demographics of certified clinical engineers, and how to prepare for the certification process to include the 2021 Body of Knowledge Survey. We'll conclude with answering any questions from the attendees. Next. The governance of the program. So the Certification in Clinical Engineering program is sponsored by the American College of Clinical Engineering, or ACCE. However, the Healthcare Technology Certification Commission, HTCC, oversees and administers the certification program. And there are two boards of examiners that report to HTCC, the US Board of Examiners and the Canadian Board of Examiners. So both the HTCC and the US and Canadian Boards of Examiners have adopted the definition of a clinical engineer that has been established by the ACCE, and that is the following. A clinical engineer is a professional who supports and advances patient care by applying engineering and managerial skills to healthcare technology. In general, clinical engineers have an education and background in engineering. They've applied their engineering education to the healthcare industry, and they have experience as a practicing clinical engineer, demonstrating a mastery of a defined core knowledge set. So the purpose of certification in clinical engineering is to promote healthcare delivery improvement through the certification and continuing assessment of competency of professionals who support and advance patient care by applying engineering and managerial skills to healthcare technology. The certification process includes establishing and measuring the level of knowledge required for certification as a clinical engineer, providing a standard of knowledge for certification, which can assist employers, the public, and other health professionals in the assessment of a clinical engineer, formally recognizing the individuals who meet eligibility requirements and pass the clinical engineering certification exam process, and finally requiring continuing personal and professional growth in the clinical engineering practice in order to maintain certification. So you may be asking yourself, why should I get certified? So we have a few reasons listed here that will hopefully help you with that question. The first reason being that certification brings the clinical engineering profession in line with other regulated US and Canadian healthcare professions. Next, it provides recognition of initial and ongoing professional competency in the role of clinical engineers. Certification can also aid career advancement opportunities both at home and abroad. And the desire to be certified could simply be a personal choice, or it could be to set a good example for others within our professional field. And finally, certification helps to promote visibility of our profession amongst healthcare leadership and other peer healthcare professionals. So now that I've hopefully convinced everyone on this call to seek certification in clinical engineering, I will pass it over to Timothy, who will talk to you about the certification process.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to some of you from towards the West Coast. There's three really major components with respect to the certification process. First of which is the application stage, where you can go to the accenet.org site, where that application is there. That application is completed, and we'll talk a bit about the requirements a little later in terms of what's part of that application. Those applications are then submitted either to the US Board of Examiners or the Canadian Board of Examiners, and are reviewed by a subset of the boards, and then the recommendation whether to proceed through with the written examination is decided. The deadline this year for the application is July 23rd. So now that Catherine's convinced you to do it, you might as well get on board and fill out your application. Once that application has been approved by the appropriate board, then you would proceed to the written examination, which is multiple choice. It's based on the ACCE body of knowledge. The questions are actually reviewed on a regular basis, and the difficulty of the exam is actually assessed by the participants of the boards themselves. Typically, the written examination is performed, I believe this year is scheduled between November 6th and November 20th. It is online, and then evaluated. And they encompass a broad range of aspects that most, as a clinical engineer, you would have experienced during your profession. Upon being successful in passing the written examination, the next stage is the oral examination, which can be a little daunting for some of you, but I'm certain that, based on your making it through the first two stages, you've got a good amount of expertise and experience, and that's really where the oral examination comes into place. In the US, there are three scenarios that are posed during the oral examination. During that examination, there are two examiners, representatives from the boards, the respective boards, and you go through these series of scenarios, answering questions. And the only exception is in Canada, because the written examination, what I should clarify is a lot of the questions in the written examination are multinational, so they've been worded in such a way that they try and cross boundaries or cross borders. There are some exceptions. And for those Canadians who are online or outside the United States, some of those questions, at least for the Canadian group, specific to standards and regulations in the US, they are actually excluded in the evaluation piece on the written examination. Back to the oral examination in Canada, like I said, in the States, you have three scenarios you go through. In Canada, you actually have a fourth scenario to make up for to address the specific Canadian standards, the regulatory bodies and the regulatory regime within Canada. But a lot of that is explained in the CCE handbook, the application handbook that you can reach at this link at the bottom of the slide. So what are your eligibility requirements? What are the sort of the foundation with which you can actually make your application and be successful to proceed through certification? They must meet a certain standard of educational and experiential requirements in order to proceed. In the United States, there are really 3 avenues with which you can go. You can be a PE with 3 years or more clinical engineering experience. You can have a BS or a higher degree in engineering specific from an accredited program with 4 or more years of engineering practice, including 3 or more years of clinical engineering practice. Or you can have a BSET degree with 8 or more years of engineering practice, including 3 or more years of clinical engineering practice. In Canada, it's a little bit more straightforward. You have to be noted as a professional engineer within your province. And as part of that licensure, there are educational requirements around accredited programs and so on and so forth. And in addition to that, you have to have 3 or more years of engineering practice, clinical engineering practice. The reason why it's slightly different in Canada is only because, in fact, in Canada, it's not legal to use the title engineer unless you are licensed as a professional engineer within your province. So what's all the documentation you got to collect in order to fulfill your application? Like I said, if you go to the ACCE website, it'll really have a more thorough explanation as to all of the different documents and what you need to complete. And these are all sent via email to the HTCC at that certification@accenet.org. So part 1 of the application is simply contact information, where you want to get correspondence, and that sort of stuff. Part 2 is a little bit more detailed. You really need to list on your employment history, your educational history, what degree you were conferred. You have to attach a copy of your CV or your resume. You have to acknowledge, because once you become certified, as you all will be successful getting through, you actually have to renew on every 3 years. And so you actually have to maintain your knowledge, your body of knowledge, and your experience. And so you need to acknowledge that in order to renew, there are certain requirements that you need to achieve. You actually have to contact your schools to get your transcripts sent directly to the HTCC, so not via yourself. For those that are international, and you need to, and may have attended school or university or college outside the United States or Canada, there is a way that you can do an equivalency evaluation of your degree that is required. And the website does have a list of different organizations who will do that evaluation, that assessment for you. And you also have to have 3 friends to do references for you that can attest to your experience, your clinical engineering expertise, your skill set, your character. And those references will be contacted directly, not through you as an applicant. And they would respond, they would fill out their reference form and send it directly to at certification@acce.org. So I'm going to pass it off now to Katrina.
Thanks, Tim. So as she just covered the processes for going through and the 3 steps for certification, I encourage everyone to go to the ACCE website and take a look at the current candidate handbook, as well as the application document, because it does detail out all the requirements and the instructions for making sure that you've completed the application and the overviews of what to expect in terms of the written and oral exam. So once that's all been successfully completed and the candidates have met all the requirements for certification and passed the examination, the respective boards will be recommending those candidates for certification in clinical engineering, either in the US or Canada by the HTCC. So a registry of certified individuals can be found also on the ACCE website. That's maintained, and so if you've successfully completed and obtained your certification, you'll be listed there on the registry. It will also list your renewal date, which is very important. So as it was described, certification is valid for 3 years, at which time it must be renewed. And so candidates are responsible for keeping track of their renewal date and submitting the renewal application and fees accordingly as instructed in the handbook that's provided on the ACC website that details what the requirements are for renewal. And so please review that and keep track of your dates. Late renewals are not accepted. Anything about questions in terms of the certification process, you can notify and contact the HTCCE, especially if you're wanting to update contact information to ensure you're getting future emails from the commission. Make sure you email them, certification@accenet.org. So talking a little bit about what is required for the renewal process for both the US and Canadian certifications, again, every 3 years, and it's to ensure that actively certified individuals are retaining their active certification status in renewing and enhancing and maintaining their clinical engineering skills. Requirements for renewal, again, are detailed on the website, and there is an application that is to be filled out, which walks through the point requirements and what you can list out in terms of your continuing practice activities. You need a total of 15 points at a minimum over the period of 3 years, and you need at least 2 points in at least 3 of the following categories. So your employment, your continuing education, that counts for things like educational classes, academic classes, any self-study. All that has to be very much detailed out in the application when you're renewing. Additional professional activities, those include your professional conferences that you attain or you attend either virtually or in person, any associations or society membership and involvement, and then again, any professional presentations, authorships, things of that nature. And then you have an opportunity that if you've enhanced your clinical engineering skills in any other way that does not quite fit into the above 3 categories, you can detail those out in the miscellaneous section. Again, please be very specific when listing out those, and it's detailed in the application and the instructions as well. So once you've completed this application and documented your continuing practice activities over the past 3 years, you'll submit that again to certification@accenet.org. And so again, very important that individuals that are certified keep track of the renewal date. So again, if your certification does expire, it will result in loss of your active certification status. There are a couple other types of certification statuses that you can achieve. So those that are retiring, for example, or have met their lifetime achievement requirements. And if you could go to the next slide, please. We'll talk about those. So again, those individuals who are retired and have an active status and either are planning to retire the next 3 years or had retired in the previous 3 years between their certification renewals, you want to request a retired status change. So that turns it into a non-active, but you will see that those are CCE-R designations. And so it recognizes those actively certified individuals that are going to retire or have retired from active employment but want to retain their certification status. The eligibility and the instructions, again, are provided on the website. There is a one-time fee for that status change. And it has to occur on or before your active CCE expiration date. So you can, the retired status is a little bit different from the emeritus status in that you can revert back should you choose to come back out of the retired status and go back to an active certification status. Again, that would be submitting that renewal application to account for your continuing practice activities and that you are active in the clinical engineering field. For those that have met a combined 30 years of actively working in the clinical engineering field and actively being certified, or have at least 15 years of documented continuous certification can apply for emeritus status. This certification status really does recognize the certified individuals that have met that lifetime achievement in the field. So we want to make sure that they're recognized. You don't have to do this before your expiration of your certification. So if you have been certified in clinical engineering that's no longer active, but you want to, and you meet the eligibility requirements, you can apply for the status change to emeritus. It does not require a fee, and it does not require any sort of ongoing renewal. It will apply for the rest of your lifetime. So this is different from the retired. It's very important to acknowledge that you cannot revert back into an active status at the emeritus status level. All right, I will turn it over to Bhaskar.
Thanks, Katrina. So let's get into the details of demographics. Hello, everyone. Just taking a segue in terms of like the things that we discussed so far, like, you know, what are the different eligibility requirements, education, and all that. I just want to quickly show some kind of statistics in terms of across the globe, based on the information that we received from the ACCE. There are currently a total of 224 certified clinical engineers. And in the table, you know, you will find a breakdown by country of where this certified clinical engineers are from and where they're currently practicing their active licenses under certified clinical engineer. A majority of these professionals, they work in a hospital setting or a major health system. And like Katrina mentioned earlier, the list of registry you know, is posted on ACCE website, and you can access it. And here, you know, we are going to provide the link where you can look at all the individuals who are currently maintaining their active certification in clinical engineering. Moving on to the next subject on ACCE. Before I get into the details of the next topic, I would like to take a moment here and, you know, just to mention, like, you know, ACCE is committed to the promotion, education, and the information exchange in the profession of clinical engineering. In the next slide, you know, we are going to share with the audience here some of the educational offerings by ACCE that definitely helps the folks who are interested in taking the exam, maybe in near future, or maybe they're already in the process of applying this year. So these are some of the educational offerings that was prepared by ACCE, and, you know, they provide it on an annual basis, especially for the people who are planning to take their CCE exam. The first one is the Clinical Engineering Certification Study Guide, and the other one is the annual CCE exam review webinar series. So this webinar series, you know, starts in August 11th this year. It's a 10 weekly course with a 1-hour session per week, which is going to cover the topics that are mentioned in the examination requirements handbook. And certification study guide. This is something to help, you know, someone who wants to get the details of the overall content of the exam, different topics, area of focus, what are the things that they can expect, is also covered in this study guide. And here we are providing the link where you can access this content on ACCE website. It's a direct link. You know, you click there and it will take you to the web page, and you can, you know, look at these two offerings. I would like to mention the disclaimer here that the ACCE administers its annual CCE exam series independently of the Board of Examiners and the Healthcare Technology Certification Commission. And also the study guide, you know, which was written by an independent group of clinical engineers who were not associated with H2E or even in the part of the examination process. And the link is here. You can always go to the web page on ACCE and you can access this content and see if you are especially thinking of taking the exam, or, you know, already in the process of taking the written exam this year. You know, these two should be a valuable resource for you. body of knowledge. This is something, which I would like to mention that this is created for a unique purpose, which is to determine the current scope of practice and knowledge base for clinical engineers. So the results that we analyze as part of the survey is used in designing the clinical engineering certification exam, and also the results will be used to ensure that the certification exam closely matches with the body of knowledge clinical engineers need to function in their day-to-day jobs. Typically, we try to do it during 3 to 5 years, but over the last, I would say, few years, we have been consistently keeping up with doing this body of knowledge survey every 3 years. And in the pie diagram, I just want to illustrate different areas of topics that are included in the survey. And again, like I said, this is something that we do every 3 years, and the results are analyzed and reviewed, and we submit a report back to the board. And in order to make sure that the certification exam really closely matches with the knowledge needed for the clinical engineer in their day-to-day roles. Some of the topics, I don't have to go through all of them, but it's going to cover the different categories of work that currently clinical engineers are currently playing in their jobs. It could be technology management, service delivery, IT, regulatory, safety, anything. Those are the things that we focus in the survey and try to get the response from the audience to see, where the industry is heading towards. Moving on to the next. And I would like to take today's opportunity as part of this webinar and also from the members of the BOK committee to initiate the 2021 body of knowledge survey. We would like to post it officially and distribute it across the globe, across the world, and with all the participants, especially who joined the call today. And pretty soon we're going to post the survey link on ACC website, the social media, or LinkedIn pages. It's going to take at least, I would say, somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes of your time, but it is very valuable for us. The feedback on the responses that we get, we're going to put a report together and submit back to the board, like I said, which they're going to review and at least look for when they're designing the certification exam for the coming years. In exchange of your time, and this is something that ACC is offering, your name will be entered to a random drawing to win one of the 3 prizes. It could be a 1-year complimentary membership, and also you could also get a $30 Amazon gift card. So these are some of the things that we are trying to promote as part of the survey, and at least get a lot of audience to participate in it. After this session, we're going to post it everywhere. Please share it with not only just you, but also with anyone else who are in the same profession, and see if we can increase the participation rate in the survey. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Bhaskar. We do have some questions, and I will read the questions, and I'll ask the panel to take a shot at answering the questions. A couple of people have asked, what about those engineers that are not in Canada and the US? How do they apply? There was 2 actually that asked the same question.
So this is Katrina. So again, I'd refer those individuals to take a look. A lot of the international candidates that do get certified in clinical engineering get certified through the US process. So again, ensuring that those individuals meet the eligibility requirements. If you do have international degrees, part of that is to get that educational equivalency evaluation completed. So again, I'd refer individuals that are international, that are interested in certification, to review the handbook and the application instructions that walk you through how to identify whether or not your current education meets the A-Beta accreditation requirements, as well as if an international degree evaluation is needed, and how to contact the member agencies to start on that evaluation of your education. So that's what I would encourage folks to do if they're interested. And again, anybody who has specific questions can always reach out and contact the commission directly at that certification at accenet.org.
I might just add,
Go ahead.
at the time, when I did my certification, I actually did mine in the US, even though I was living in Canada. One of the things that's pretty clear, and it's exhibited by the fact that the Canadian and US boards actually share the same scenarios in the written exam. It's quite global in terms of what clinical engineering and what the scope of practice is. What I would encourage you is that for those international participants or hopefuls is to take the clinical engineering webinar series that'll help you prepare and address some of maybe the regulatory side of things and the standard side of things to make you successful through the process. So I wouldn't let that be too much of too intimidating to go through it, because it certainly is possible. The bulk of it is your exposure to the scope of work.
Thanks, Tim. Renato Castro asked this question: what are the common fields of study paths that a candidate would take to obtain a professional engineer license qualification? I'm not sure who wants to take a stab at that one. Tim? Or, I guess it would depend on what country you're in. Reality.
I mean, in Canada, it's provincial, so that's the licensing for professional engineering is a provincial jurisdiction, and I believe it's a state jurisdiction in the US. So it really would depend on what. I think it's fairly consistent across a country, but
I think just to add to Tim, what you mentioned, I think in the US, before you go for the professional licensing, you need to complete your fundamental engineering exam and also practice under a licensed professional in order to be qualified for the professional licensing, depending upon the state where you are working from.
Next question. I believe this person's in the US, Raymond Dooley. 19 years CE experience, Bachelor of Science, Technical Management, completed in 2008. Based on that info, would I be eligible?
So again, I encourage anybody that has specific questions about their eligibility, again, to review the documentation. We can't offer any formal determinations of eligibility to people inquiring today. Again, encourage you to reach out to the commission at that email that's been provided, as well as to review the documentations provided on the ACCE website.
Thank you. Raymond Dooley asked, what are the fees associated with the application and exams?
Good question. So those again are detailed in the handbook, and we can take a look at those real quick. So application fee for US is $475, and so that is your application fee. There's no fee unless it's a retest fee that apply to the examination. Again, I'd refer you to page 6 of the handbook.
And those are the same fees for Canada as well.
Next question. I have equivalency from WES Canada. Will that work? And Tim?
Yeah, so I would suggest, once again, just like Katrina was saying,
Yeah.
go to the ACC website and it'll list out groups that are have been identified as assessing groups for your educational experience and your degree.
Okay. Scrolling through the questions again. I will note, someone asked this question. This presentation will be posted after we finish today on the ACCE website, so you can look for the whole presentation there if you wish to download it or review it. Certainly, please do. Is there any practice questions available for the CCE exam?
This is Catherine. There are some practice questions listed in the study guide. Again, that's made independently of HTCC. So this is just questions developed by other clinical engineers who've been through certification. So there's some there, and also in the webinar series, I think they do go through some practice questions, or at least give you some ideas of topics to study further.
Thanks, Catherine. This question, I'm not 100% sure, but we can throw it out there. And it was just, the person was asking scope of clinical engineers in Canada. And I mean, no, it's not scope of clinical engineers in India, sorry, my mistake. And I guess the question would be, have engineers from clinical engineers been evaluated previously from India, and have they got their CCE? Maybe that's a better wording on the question. Okay. Have you had any, to your knowledge, Katrina, have you had any CCE applicants from India?
So the board can't get into the specific of who applies. I'd refer you to the demographic slide that ACCE put together. I don't see that India is listed, but yeah, that's all we can say at the point. Not sure if it was touching more, that question touching more on the body of knowledge survey, is what I interpreted from that. But
Thanks, Katrina. Next question from Mario Ramirez, Tim. Do you foresee that the hospital accreditation bodies will require hospitals to have certified clinical engineers for the safe management of medical technology?
Well, I can certainly, in Canada, Accreditation Canada actually does certifications where it's the joint commission in the States. I can, I hope actually at some point they do.
So do I.
They do recognize this certification and this unique skill set that's required for healthcare organizations. I think healthcare in general is highly regulated. The professions are highly regulated with the colleges and associations, which, Catherine sort of spoke to it as to why we should, pursue certification, because we are working amongst a highly regulated professional body. So, my opinion is I hope at some point it actually does come to this, but I think, the proof is in the pudding. I think the more certified clinical engineers are working in the field, that'll help promote and encourage the recognition that, we actually, maybe it is going to be more demand for it in the different areas, at least certainly in Canada, that's for sure.
Thanks, Tim. Someone else asked this question: how and where will the oral examination take place? Again, that'll vary from US to Canada. I'm not sure.
Right, and I would say that again, those eligible oral exam candidates will be contacted directly by the commission for that scheduling, and so at that time, those candidates will be informed as to how and where the oral exam is going to take place.
Thanks, Katrina. Another one from Canada. In terms of gaining experience in the field, since it's hard to get a job as a clinical engineer in a hospital right after graduation for new graduates, is there a mentorship program in Canada where certified clinical engineers can mentor a recent graduate for certification, thereby the candidate gets the experience required? A lot of recent graduates get into jobs in other fields because a job in CE in a hospital usually requires previous experience. Interestingly enough, that was identified when we did our survey earlier in the year, and one of our recommendations was that we develop a mentorship program. But panel, do you know of anyone offering a formal program? I don't. There's a lot of our colleagues that are doing it informally presently, and that's actually a good idea. I know for professional engineers, they have mentorship programs, and they've been highly successful. So we should probably look at that. That's a good point to raise. It's something we should look at developing over the next few years to encourage the growth of our field. Okay, the next question: what can be considered clinical engineering practice?
And this is part. Yeah, this is part of the eligibility requirements, and that's outlined in page 5 of the handbook. So we define clinical engineering practice as engineering practice within the clinical engineering environment or in support of clinical activities and consistent with the ACCE definition of clinical engineer.
Thanks, Katrina. Roberto, is it possible to consult the current BOK considered for certification? I mean the current one. Anyone want to take a shot at that? I guess the answer would be yes.
Yeah, this is Catherine. I don't really understand the question completely, but
I do too. I mean, I think in some cases it's people typing out a question and maybe translating it sometimes.
Yeah, but I think the body of knowledge, the current body of knowledge is taken into account in the certification, how the questions are developed for that, if that's the question.
Yes.
And I would also point to the content outline that's on page 17 of the handbook that gets into what the content was included and listed in the BOK that's used in terms of the content that will be used for the examination. So that you'll see listed the various activities and scope on page 17 of the handbook.
Are internships considered towards professional experience? I guess it depends on the jurisdiction.
Yeah, and again, I would say we can't offer a formal opinion on that. I would take that's for the boards to determine. So without knowing the specifics, we can't answer that question today.
The next question: will there be a oral exam this year? How will the format be? Will there be any special procedures and processes? And what would the tentative dates be?
So again, there will be an oral exam, and those eligible candidates will be contacted by the commission and made aware of the circumstances for the oral exam, as well as the potential dates and the scheduling of their oral exam. So that those candidates eligible will be contacted and arrangements made directly with those candidates.
Thank you. What is the difference between a clinical engineer and a biomedical engineer? Actually, I think it was mentioned in the slide deck. So I think we can just refer back to the slide deck on that one. It was clearly defined earlier on in the presentation, which is available. Okay, next question. How can I apply from India? I have been working as a biomedical engineer for the last 6 years. Should I need to prepare for exams to migrate to Canada, US, or UK?
So I would, again, for those who have specific questions about the application process, again, I would refer you to the handbook on the eligibility requirements if you do meet the eligibility requirements, and again, can provide the documentation required as part of the application process, you know, that's how you would go about applying for CCE. So again, you know, please reference the application document as well as the handbook and any specific questions regarding applying for the certification or the certification process in your situation can be directed to the commission.
Thanks, Katrina. A couple more asking about the materials from the presentation, but it will be posted after in the ACC website. If you're having trouble accessing it, you can check the link and let people know and get directions on how to access the presentation. I only have a national diploma in biomedical engineering technology. Would I be able to get certification in clinical engineering? And I think, Katrina, you've sort of already answered that. What do you think?
So I would, if you want the specifics on the international degree of equivalency evaluation, you can refer to under the official transcript section of the application document. So if you are able to get that degree equivalency and it does meet the eligibility requirements for the US CCE, then you'd be able to apply. So again, I would refer anybody interested to those documents regarding their eligibility.
Thanks. A question asking how to access the ACC's study guide material. That can be done again through the website. There is a link in the website, and you can acquire it through the website. And with that, how can I apply from India? I'm a working BMet. Katrina?
So again, I would refer to the application instructions. It would be the same, you know, again, if you meet the eligibility requirement and complete the applications according to the instructions, that's how you would apply.
Okay. Next question. What is the difference between this certification and the HTM certification with Amy? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'd say, yeah, the difference, I think, you know, again, you can look at the two. I don't have in front of me exactly what it is, but I think it's the eligibility requirements are different. But again, what we're talking about today is a certified clinical engineering certification. And so I'd refer to the documentation in comparison to the AMY one. But they are two different certifications for two different purposes.
Thanks. Well, is there any clinical engineering online classes and training in the future planned?
Well, I would encourage you to attend the webinar series that Bhaskar was talking about. I recall back when I went through my certification, I subscribed to the, well, it wasn't webinars at those times, kind of dating myself, but that was several nights in a coffee shop going through different presentations, but they are a valuable experience to go through, and they're directly coming from the body of knowledge, so they're quite helpful.
Absolutely. For international applicants, for international applicants, will the oral exam be virtual this year?
Again, I would say that the eligible candidates will be contacted by the commission to schedule their oral exams for this year.
Okay, are there any plans, Mario with another question. Are there any plans, thank you, Mario, to have a written and oral exam in other languages such as Spanish and French?
So I know the Canadian board has often contemplated about having French versions of the written exam. It's actually quite cost prohibitive. It's extremely expensive, and it is quite a bit of work in order to determine the difficulty and the balance of the exam itself. You know, perhaps in the long term, but in the short term, I think it would be a real challenge to, at least from a Canadian perspective, to do it in French.
Yeah. How interrelated is the field to biomedical engineering? Can I do a master's in clinical engineering with a BSc in biomedical engineering?
That would really be dependent on the school or the university that you're seeking and what their requirements are.
That's right. Scrolling down further. They were inquiring about Brazilian clinical engineers for ACCE certification. If we could talk about it, but I think we just refer back to what Katrina said previously. There have been candidates that have been successful in gaining their certification from different countries. What can be considered clinical engineering practice?
So that one I believe we answered already. And again, I referred to the section on page 5 about clinical engineering practice, which is the engineering practice within the clinical environment or in support of the clinical activities and consistent with the ACCE definition of clinical engineering.
Thanks. Hi, about the demographics table shown by Bhaskar. I realize that only a few countries apart from Canada and the US have that CCE. How can you help others and people in other countries obtain their CCE? I mean, those countries do not know about it, and I think it's sorry, I'm reading through the question. I guess they want to know how they can promote it in countries where it's not common.
Maybe one way that we can promote is through the survey that we are going to do now on the body of knowledge survey, which has specific questions in terms of the location, type of job they are doing and all that. And if you see more interest, people participating from other countries, and when we put the report back to the board, I think that kind of provides them a venue to see how they can expand the scope of this certification promotion program.
I mean, you know, one thing that certification does, and it sounds sort of superficial, obviously, but you know, you do have the legal right at that point to note a CCE beside your name, which does give you some exposure, and if anything, will ask a question. And what it does also is it makes it, you know, you are now measured against the body of knowledge. You're measured against clinical engineering practice from a standard perspective. And one thing I've often told students who talk to me about certification is, at the end of the day, it's recognized. Certainly in Canada and the US, but outside, obviously, we've seen the demographics that Bhaskar showed. And if you are interested in traveling or seeking employment, you know, that sets the stage in terms of what that knowledge level is, and it's measured and it's been accredited. And that's quite powerful, and it's powerful as you're seeking employment in different areas. So, you know, sort of cart before the horse kind of thing, but you know, it's you know, in my mind, it's certainly something that is, and Catherine kind of alluded to it. For some, it's just a personal initiative to move forward, but it really does set the stage for professional development and will open doors. I'm convinced of that.
Thanks, Tim. Will the ACCE have a new requirement for system clinical engineering certification? And this is from Rahim from Canada. Will there be specialization clinical engineering certifications, I guess is the question. Do you anticipate that, Tim or Catherine, I guess, or Katrina?
So I guess I can only speak to the certification for clinical engineering. So, you know, if there are other certifications to be created and offered, I can speak to that. Just the CCE.
This is Catherine. I don't believe there's been any discussion on creating a systems-specific clinical engineering certification, at least not through ACCE. I think the clinical engineering certification in general is all-encompassing of different types of clinical engineers. So it would cover that. We don't have anything specifically for systems, but it would be captured under a certified clinical engineer.
Thank you. Can you start the program?
Yeah, I just want to make note of the time we are at going on 10. So I'm not sure if we're going to able to get through the rest of the questions.
I don't think we'll be able to get them all, actually.
Here.
Yeah. Maybe one quick one. Can you start the process before completing 3 years of clinical engineering experience? I think this is a new grad asking the question.
Yeah. Good question. And this is when we do get, no, you have to have met all the requirements of including the practice requirements prior to application. So if you have not met those, you know, there's been questions about what if I'm close. You do have to meet, and again, we don't round up or anything. It's the full 12 months of the year. So you do have to meet those before applying.
Well, I think we've effectively run out of time, everyone. And I'd like to thank everyone for participating today, and remind everyone to please complete the survey on the link on this slide. And I'll repeat that the slides will be available on the website after we close today. And thanks again, and everyone have a good day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Okay.